Hi there. In this video, we will talk about learning objectives, what they are, and how to frame them. The first step towards achieving success in delivering or receiving any kind of effective learning is the knowledge of why that particular learning needs to occur. In other words, for any fruitful lesson, its goals need to be clear to the instructor as well as to the learner before the lesson is indulged with in any manner. To accomplish this, two types of statements can be written at the beginning of any lesson: the goal of the lesson and the objectives of the lesson. Out of these two statements, the objectives of a lesson or learning objectives are the most important and essentially form its crux or backbone. Simply put, the learning goals of a lesson inform learners and teachers about the purpose of the lesson. For example, the goal of today's lesson is for learners, that is, you, to know what learning objectives are and how to frame them. Learning objectives, on the other hand, define what learners should be able to accomplish after a lesson in terms of measurable skills and/or knowledge. For example, the objective of today's lesson is for learners, that is you, to be able to frame measurable learning objectives for a lesson using suitable Bloom's verbs. Clear, measurable learning objectives are essential for any good lesson, both to the instructor as well as to the learners. Learning objectives are important to instructors because they help instructors break down a unit into small micro lessons, each focusing on some specific knowledge and/or skill. They help instructors identify skills that learners should be able to acquire from a lesson. They help instructors plan teaching strategies and flow of a lesson. They help instructors create good assessments for lessons. And they help instructors track learners' progress and change strategies if required. Learning objectives are important to learners as well. This is because they help learners understand why they are going through a lesson and what they will learn out of it. They guide learners through a lesson and help them assess their own progress. A learning objective can be deemed good or bad, or effective or ineffective, based on some characteristics. Let us now discuss these characteristics. A good learning objective is clear. Good learning objectives are simple statements that clearly reflect the goal or expected outcome of a lesson. Concise. Good learning objectives are short and to the point and get straight to the point. Map to the curriculum. A good learning objective is mapped to the curriculum or syllabus appropriately. It is present in a curriculum only because there is a specific need for the knowledge and/or skills covered in that learning objective. Measurable or observable. This is probably the most important characteristic of a learning objective. A learning objective, in order to be effective, must be measurable or observable. In other words, learners at the end of a lesson should be able to clearly demonstrate the skills and/or knowledge listed in a given learning objective. For example, if a learning objective says that at the end of a lesson, learners should be able to write a 500-word essay, the action verb write is the measurable verb in the learning objective, which learners should be able to clearly demonstrate and instructors should be able to clearly observe and measure through assessments. Other examples of measurable verbs are explain, draw, calculate, differentiate, etc. Only made up of one measurable verb. Every good learning objective should contain only one measurable verb. If a learning objective contains more than one measurable verb, it is usually best to split it into two or more individual learning objectives. For example, if we have a learning objective such as learners should be able to distinguish between exponentially increasing and exponentially decreasing variables in graphs and plot such variables on graphs, it would be best to split this objective into two individual objectives, each containing only one measurable verb. In this case, the two learning objectives would be: learners should be able to distinguish between exponentially increasing and exponentially decreasing variables in graphs, and learners should be able to plot exponentially increasing and exponentially decreasing variables on graphs. The discussion about characteristics of a good lesson plan brings us to a very important topic closely related to it, which is the difference between measurable and non-measurable verbs. A measurable verb is essentially an action word which, when demonstrated by a person, can easily be observed and measured by another. For example, a person can easily demonstrate calculating. So, calculate is a measurable verb. Other examples of measurable verbs are describe, identify, classify, create, and so on. A non-measurable verb is an action verb that essentially portrays behaviors of a person that cannot be observed or concretely measured by another. For example, I may understand a fact, but if I tell you so, you will just have to take my word for it. Is there any exact way you can observe me understanding the fact? No, there is not. So, understand is a non-measurable verb. Other examples of non-measurable verbs are know, observe, learn, and accept. A learning objective should always contain only measurable verbs because these are the actions that can be demonstrated by learners and observed and measured by instructors through assessments. We learned about Bloom's taxonomy in the previous lesson. The most important application of Bloom's taxonomy is the creation of effective learning objectives depicting skills of different Bloom's levels that learners are expected to achieve at the end of lessons. Objectives with measurable verbs from the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy are said to impart lower order thinking skills in learners, whereas objectives with measurable verbs from the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy are said to impart higher order skills in learners. This slide shows a small chart containing some measurable verbs from different Bloom's levels. However, one must bear in mind that some of these verbs may fit more than one of these levels and their exact function can be judged only by verifying the context in which they are used. To conclude today's lesson, we will briefly go through the different steps involved in framing good learning objectives. These steps are: go through the relevant syllabus or curriculum standards, split the lesson topic into appropriate chunks or micro-lessons, identify skills that learners should be able to demonstrate at the end of each micro-lesson, using appropriate Bloom's verbs, frame concise, clear learning objectives for each micro-lesson. As you learned in today's lesson, learning objectives form the backbone of any lesson in any kind of educational setting. When formed well, they can help create enriching learning experiences and an overall difference in a learner's skills and abilities. To learn more on the topic, explore the additional resources given near the end of this week's module. You can also use the internet to research more on the topic and should consider posting any good web links that you find on the topic to the week's general discussion forum. Thank you, and I will see you in the next lesson.